guess I don't need to read this, but. All right, I call this meeting the Magnolia, let's better take this off. I call this meeting the Magnolia Independent School District to order. Let the record show that a quorum of board members is present, that this meeting has been duly called, and notice that this meeting has been posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code Chapter 551. So if everybody please stand, Mr. Joe Duncan is going to lead us in our invocation and pledges.
Good evening, folks. At MISD, we have a long-standing tradition of saying a prayer before our board meeting. If you'd like to join us, just please bow your heads. Dear Lord, we thank you for all the tremendous blessings you give us every day. And we thank you for our fabulous students, our faculty, our administration, and certainly our community. And Lord, we know these are turbulent times right now, and we ask you to bless everyone with good health. And we also know during these times it's really tough for everyone to engage with each other because we seem to be separated. So ask us to please help us to be focused. Please help us to be engaged. And we ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
We're now going to say our pledges. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Honor
Honor
the
the
Texas
Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. Okay. The next item on our agenda is the announcement of the board annual credit hours, continuing education credits that we've got to get all the time. This is usually done at the April board meeting due to the MISD elections being held in May, but because of the COVID-19 thing, the state commissioner extended this or waived the board training requirements until January 31, which is obviously several months from now. But in spite of that, even though the training hours were waived by the TEA, our board members demonstrated dedication to continuous education by completing it anyway. So we did the continuing education we needed to do over the summer, most of it. And I'm happy to announce that Chuck Adcox, Christy Baker, Joe Duncan, Sonia Eagle, Kelly McDonald, Dr. Travis Moffitt, and I, Gary Blizzard, have met or exceeded all required hours of school board continuing education training for the 1920 school year. So, good job. Okay, Ms. Hinkleman,
Yes, sir.
do we have anybody signed up to speak?
No, sir, we don't.
Okay, all right, we'll breeze right through this, and you're next.
Well, I don't know if I have an official report, but I mean, I can kind of report a little bit on the status of where we have been for our online instruction and for our in-person instruction at the campuses. And I'm kind of happy to report that, you know, we're probably one of the few districts in this part of the Southeast Texas area, particularly in Montgomery County even, that have had, at this point, we've had all of our kids that want to come back to our classrooms at some point have had a rotation, so where they came through and had one day in front of their teacher at school. And so we're proud of that. We've had a chance to practice a lot of our protocols of safety and other things in building, and really went off without a lot of hitch. We're into our second week. It's really those in-class part are supporting what we're doing with online instruction with our kids. And I think that's going well. Obviously, that's not our preferred method of delivery. But I think our teachers are rising to that occasion and making do and making sure our kids are getting information and be able to work with. I know a lot of times it's a stretch and a difficulty with a lot of parents to be able to manage that. But our teachers, I think, are really assisting, and I really think the in-school rotations have been helping the kids kind of connect to what we do at home as a part of that. As you know, part of our reason for delaying has been that, not only the hospital district, but Montgomery County Department of Health asked all the districts in Montgomery County to delay the large-scale bringing of kids back into our schools till after Labor Day. And partly their real concern at that point when they asked us that was that The ICU room capacity was almost at peak capacity in Montgomery County and in Harris County. So we listened to their request, and all of us are waiting till September the 8th to start our full group. But we took also advantage of the fact that they told us we could use smaller groups in our campus, so we bring them in by grade levels. And again, we think that's been going well. About 85 to 95% of the kids that we, or 85 to 90% of our kids that are enrolled have been showing up at the in-school sessions. So it's pretty good. We've been asking everybody now to pick a lane when we come back for September the 8th, whether you're going to be online, and we'll continue to support those kids and do everything we can to make that a good experience if you don't feel comfortable coming back into those school buildings at that time. But for those who do, we're going to start back up September the 8th with all the kids that are willing to be up there. We're going to put the safety protocols in place. We really haven't had a lot of problems with masks. Kids are wearing the mask, and again, that's been going well. And so we look forward to it. Today, we did receive a letter, and I'll make sure the board gets a copy of that, from Montgomery County Health and from the hospital district that said, in looking at their metrics, we're a go for a September 8th start back with all the kids. So we do have a letter from them recommending that. So I'm excited about us moving forward and getting better at what we do in terms of getting kids to school, from back from school, transportation part of it, feeding kids during the day, and getting there. So we'll be ready come September 8th to get started with our kids back. And I think our teachers are excited about it. So any questions about what we've done so far in that? And then I'll switch gears and talk about hurricanes. Well, in case you guys,
I think it's great. I think it's exciting.
yeah, I
We
think
can get back
we
to
made,
normal, you're getting acclimated, I think it's awesome.
I think we made the best decisions based on where we were, and obviously we really need to listen to our medical community in terms of that. And it's just given us a chance to be back as teachers and staff, and you know, there were some people a little concerned about something, but they've done well, and I'm proud of our teachers and kids. We've had, you know, smaller groups of kids back in the building, but it feels like school when our kids are back in there, and it's feeling good. And so I'm excited about September the 8th and all the things that are leading forward to that. But
Let me say one thing before you move on. I would like to say how proud I am of our teachers. You know, I think in other parts of the country, they've not had the reception. Those teachers, I think, have not been willing to or wanted to participate with kids going to school. And I really appreciate the willingness of our teachers to step out there and be so supportive to get our kids back in those buildings. And unless you're, I think, and I consider our teachers to be one of those frontline people. You know, I think until you are one of those frontline people, you don't know what it's like.
absolutely.
And I appreciate all of our teachers for being willing to do that.
I want to second that. I had the opportunity to be on this little podcast a week or two back with a guy that asked me to do it and was asking a bunch of questions. And when they got to the teachers, I said, they're our heroes. These are the guys that they got their head on the swivel and they've got to adapt to every changing rule every day. Man, they're our heroes.
And we've just not, from what we've heard from the administration, we just have not had the distractions that maybe other districts have had. In fact, I think our students are being welcomed back by those teachers, and they've been completely productive and supportive of getting our kids back in there.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't be prouder of our teachers. And you know, I know there's been some that they've had some concerns about some of this, and they've had to soul search and step up to the plate. And when we talked about at convocation about that, this is an opportunity where we get a chance to serve not only our community but our state and our kiddos, and I think it has really put a spotlight on just how important our teachers, what an important role not only public education but our teachers play in the lives of our family and our state and our country. We have to have our teachers there, and the role they play is just paramount, and we've got to get our kids back into the schools with those teachers. And so I think they're ready, and we'll even be more ready by by the time we get to September 8th. So anyway, thank y'all for your support and recognition of them. That means a whole lot. But if you hadn't noticed, we had 2 hurricanes swirling around out there, and it looks like we've got one that we got to pay a little more attention to. So Laura looks like it's going to roll in here or somewhere along the Texas coast sometime late Wednesday night and Thursday or so. So we're watching that very closely. I think we're going to go ahead, Denise, where are you back there? We're going to go ahead and push out something to our teachers, and that on Wednesday we're going to do instruction online only. We're not going to have any teachers or students come up to the building, and we can have our teachers tomorrow prepare for all online. And depending upon what happens, we just don't need kids and teachers coming up to the building on Wednesday. So Denise will have that statement going out probably tomorrow morning as we watch and pray. And we sure hope that hurricane will take sort of a northeasterly sort of curve and turn, and we'll get out of the bullseye of it. But I think we have to be ready and prepared, and we just don't need people in our building. We don't need kids back and forth on buses. And then we'll make decisions about what we need to do on Thursday. We have already, as we do, been meeting with our county representatives, and we play a pretty large role in case we have any type of shelter situations in the county. Be that because we got a big rain event here, or we got to evacuate some of those people in the community that we don't need to, or if we got folks that are evacuating from other parts along the coast that come up this way. And so I have offered up our event center as our first line of a shelter, and we'll be working with the county in that if we need to open it up. And we're prepared and ready to roll and open that building up, and let's hope and pray that that's not necessary. But as we've talked about before, that building, not only does it serve us as just having a great place to have events for our district and for our kiddos and all those things, when we get into a situation like this, you guys allowed us the foresight of putting some of the planning parts in that building place. We've got generator capacity on it. Our water's backed up with generators. We've got showers and restroom facilities to take care of those people that have to be staged there. And so it becomes a perfect facility for us to have for emergency, for shelter. It's got a kitchen that we can feed people out of. And the best thing about it is if we get any people in there till we move, we don't have to worry about moving those people out to get school back up, because it's not a frontline campus. So the county's where, and we're again, we're just planning in case that becomes a reality. And we also have some other schools that can be used as shelters if we have to, but again, we're just that's just part of what we have to do as a school district. Our bus drivers sometimes stand by us so they can help us shuttle some folks out of low water areas. So we're going to be ready in case we have to. We'll be ready for the worst and just hope for the best in some of that stuff. But that's what it looks like it's on store for us for the remainder of this week. And we'll, I guess we won't see you guys till after the September the 8th, will we?
It's Monday after that.
Yeah, okay. So I'll be able to report on a great first opening by that time.
There you go.
So that's it, Prez.
As if COVID wasn't challenging enough, we throw a hurricane.
Throw this in the middle of it all, yeah. We'll be fine.
Yeah.
I think the real challenge is gonna be telling the high school seniors that they can't have the whole campus to themselves one day a week when this all goes back to normal. They're all thinking that's kinda cool to be the only ones on campus.
I heard several comments from the teachers about they wish lunch could look like that every day, the number of kids up there. So.
Uh-huh.
But it's gone well, really has.
Good stuff. Thank you, sir. Okay, we're going to now go to our consent agenda, and this portion of the agenda is routine and just enacted with one motion unless we have any other need for discussion. So has anybody got any questions about our consent agenda tonight? Are we all good? Okay. We need a motion to approve that then, consent agenda items 7A through D. Motion by Chuck, seconded by Kelly. All in favor? All right, that motion passes.
No,
All right,
Dr.
Dr.
Morris.
Wonderful.
You can sit in a chair, Dr. Morris, and still reach the microphone, and that would make me so happy. You,
Taking you up on
you,
that. Is that bragging because he's tall or?
no, he's not looking very comfortable. There you go.
I'll be on that one.
There you
No
go.
disrespect. Center of attention.
Well, the mommy and me asked you to, so you're not in trouble.
All right. So now we have the 2020-21 public hearing, or we'll have a presentation, then we'll open it for public comment for budget and tax rate purposes. Culmination of many meetings during the summer that the board's been part of, but so I don't think that there will be a lot of surprises. But before we get into the three primary budgets, I want to talk just a little bit about the financial stability of the district, something important obviously that we want to touch on occasion. Then we'll get into the three primary funds that are required to have board approval, and then a little bit of information about the tax rates, okay? Then we'll be asking you to adopt these in the regular meeting like we normally do. So financial stability of the district, obviously the two largest indicators for our district's financial strength is your fund balance and your bond rating, and obviously your fund balance will play in to your bond rating along with many other factors. So what this shows here is for the Financial Integrity Rating System of Texas report, TEA's financial report card, if you will, they target districts to have a minimum of 75 days of operating expenses and fund balance, or roughly 2.5 months, right? For first purposes, if you exceed 75 days, you receive a perfect score, okay? So as you look at our history here, you can see that, we've gone from around 50 days back in 07, 08 to over 100 for the past several days. And so I think that puts us in a very good position, if you will, but it also speaks to the fact that we're not escrowing taxpayer dollars and things of that nature. It's very healthy, and it's a good position to be in. It's one of the things that has led to an increase in our bond rating that I'll show in just a moment. So, any questions on that? And so here's our bond rating. I know the board is aware of this, but we haven't talked about it in some time. Due to our financial stability with our fund balance and many other economic factors, some within our control and some not, in terms of strength of tax base and things of that nature. We've had 2 bond rating upgrades in the last handful of years since 2011. And obviously, and we'll talk a little bit about this later tonight in a refunding opportunity, but that's something that saves us a tremendous amount of interest on bonds, voter-approved debt, if you will. So it's a good position to be in as well. So like I said, in some, I think we're in as good a financial position as we've ever been in, and I think it's important to note that. So, any questions on that, board? Okay. So let's get right into the general fund. Obviously, the general fund, or M&O fund, used for day-to-day operations of the school district. The board is aware of all of this that I'll cover briefly, but obviously we have a cautious outlook with the unknown of state funding cuts next biennium. So we're trying to be very strategic with the budget, if you will. Revenue in terms of year to year is limited in terms of what you can increase as a result of tax rate compression associated with HB 3 and Senate Bill 2. We also had some unkind, results, if you will, for state aid purposes, because we fell out of the fast growth allotment, which is given to the top 25% growing school districts in the state of Texas, and we're right at about 28, just beyond that, 3 percentage points. End result versus previous year is really basically no change in revenue. We're projecting a $250,000 increase, and that's primarily associated with anticipated student growth. Okay. On the expenses side, obviously, heavy service-oriented industry, where we focus on being competitive with our benefits and pay. There is some money available related to our approach for bonus purposes in 1920. Provided some wiggle room, if you will, in terms of money available for 2021. So at the end of the day, we were able to, I believe, be competitive with our benefits, give a 2% raise to all employees. We're once again planning to give a $500 retention bonus to all employees, excluding administration, on November 15th. And then finally, we wrapped up our open enrollment for all medical, and I think you'll see the results there, and they're very kind. So for the first time ever, we offered an alternate to TRS Active Care. We had heavier participation than we've ever had, 1,250 employees for the two combined. And of those, 800, roughly right at 800 employees chose the new alt medical. So that speaks to the strength of the plan, the savings for our employees, and so forth.
Roughly, what are the number of districts in the state of Texas that have been able to offer?
I mean, less than 50,
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah,
I mean,
I'd say so.
probably less than 20, Doc, at this point. So it's a good position to be in. It's really a benefit for our employees. Like I said, the numbers speak for themselves in terms of our folks jumping on board.
Options are always good.
Premium savings and so forth and so on. So we're pretty pleased with the end result. I think the alt medical folks were shooting a little bit higher than that, hoping for 75 to 80%, but 65% in year one is pretty stout to me. So hopefully that'll pan out well this year in terms of our budget projections, and we can do some more creative things next year with the local alt medical. Okay. Questions on that? So we'll transition into the numbers. Obviously, most important from the board's perspective, a balanced budget for general fund purposes exceeding $120 million. As we do each and every year, you'll see a breakdown of kind of how we spend our dollars from an accounting function perspective versus state norms. One of the things, or a couple of things that we like to point out on this is how we channel more dollars into the classroom than the average district does in the state of Texas, which I think means that we're doing things right. Also, you look at our general administration cost is much lower than the state average as well. So we're sort of lean at the top, if you will. And so at the end of the day, again, basically the changes versus the previous year are all of those things that we talked about on the previous slide in terms of raises and so forth. Again, a balanced budget for the first time, obviously exceeding $120 million. And that's the general fund in a nutshell. I will point out as well, for equity purposes, you can see at the top of the page what we receive in total revenue versus the average district in the state of Texas, and we're still relatively far behind in terms of hundreds of dollars per student. And that's just a culmination of the state funding system throughout the years. Obviously, we know that we were not one of the large winners associated with HB3. And so, but yeah, we're held to the same accountability requirements and things of that nature. But obviously for equity in any session, it's going to be important for us to continue to fight for that. May not be the right time to do this next biennium, but any questions on that, guys? Okay. Next slide, the other two funds, and this is very simple, but on the left-hand side of the page, we have our food service fund for our cafeteria workers. Really no change since the previous year except for the raises and bonuses. Yet again, a balanced budget, one of those things that the average district in the state of Texas cannot say. Go back to this slide, you'll see average district in the state of Texas usually spends about 1% on food service out of the general fund, and it's something that we've been able to maintain as a positive balance. So, a good position to be in. Debt service fund, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later on, but yet again, a balanced budget allows us to take care of our voter-approved bonded indebtedness, as well as be fairly aggressive with some bond defeasance opportunities and saving on some interest. Okay, any questions on that? Fund balance on each of those funds is strong. Anytime you can get to approximately or close to half of your debt payment for the year, or at least your required debt payment for the year in debt service, is a good position to be in. And of course, 1.4 million, we actually were slapped for having too much fund balance at one time in the food service fund. So we've taken care of some needs there, but we're in a good position there as well. Go back just quickly. I know we talked about fund balance on the first or second slide, but the actual number is there towards the middle of the page, just over $32 million. Okay. So, if there's no questions on the budget at this point, before we open it to public hearing, talk a little bit about tax rate. I guess in sum, we're proposing a 3.5 cent decrease in the tax rate, which aligns with the target that Dr. Stevens put out several months ago that we're going to try to get to for our constituents. INS rate stays the same. M&O decreases by 3.5 pennies. You can see it in a historical view here that may surprise some folks, but the peak of the actual tax rate was in 05-06. We were at $1.79. And obviously this is the second year in a row where we've decreased the tax rate. And it's been since, 2010-11, since there was any increase in the tax rate. So I think it's a good position to be in. Any questions on that? And just briefly, I wanted to show this obviously as we talk about our INS debt rate as well. This is how we compare, and I know the board, we showed this last month, but how we compare to some of our peers at the end of the 1920 school year in terms of our debt per student. Principal outstanding, we've been very aggressive with defeasance and refunding and things of that nature, and so something that we're very pleased with, but we also obviously keep an eye on it. Question on
I love this slide.
that?
As you
Definitely
know-
for you, Missy.
As you know, this is my favorite slide. But what I love about this is that the only debt that we have is voter-approved debt.
That's an excellent point, yes, ma'am. I
And
mean,
just-
there's many districts who have debt on the maintenance and operations side, and it's something that we've been able to avoid, but still take care of our facilities. So,
And it's unusual to find a school district that has, this is the only debt, it's the voter-approved bond debt.
100%, it's what we call good debt. It's
Yes.
not credit card debt. Voter approved.
Just want to make sure people understood that.
Yes, ma'am.
And I think it's worth pointing out also that if you look at things like our transportation, we spend roughly twice as much as what some other districts spend, and yet this is what our debt is.
Yes, sir.
I mean, we've done, and if you look at our facilities, I think we've done a great job. So, you know, I know certain people have discussed complaints about the event center, about what we've done to the stadiums, or what we've done with a lot of things. Well, I think they've really not delved into them deep enough to see how well, what good, and I was looking to see if Tim Bruner's here, but I think he's not here tonight, but they have no idea that compared to last bond, how under budget we were, and yet we provided all these extra amenities to not only the district, but to the community. So
I think that's an excellent point, Mr. Duncan. I mean, obviously, it's something that we try to do each and every year after we know what the budget is going to land. We take a portion of the gross surplus and shift it over to take care of our capital projects. And so it limits the effect on the tax rate for future bonds and things of that nature. So, yes, sir. Any questions on that? Okay, so I felt like that was really quick, but it's a different view sitting down here too. So that completes the presentation for budget purposes and for tax rate purposes. And so we will open it up for public hearing, I guess, when Mr. Blizzard is ready.
Sure. Now, before we do that, I mean, just about every measure, I mean, the one Sonia pointed out, the ones Joe pointed out, I mean, the bond rating, the budget, the operating expenses, the tax rate, I mean, every single slide shows a good picture for this district. It's quite good, so thank you, that's just awesome.
Thank you, sir.
That's awesome. Okay, so at this time, we're gonna go into a public hearing regarding the 2020-2021 proposed budget. So we're gonna open the mic up for public hearing portion of the meeting for anybody who has any comments regarding what Dr. Morris just presented to us. Don't wanna cut it too soon, we're going once, going twice. Okay, if there's no comments, and we'll conclude this hearing. The time is 7:00.
Are you taking other comments or questions?
What's that?
Are you taking other comments or questions, or just about the hearing? I mean, just about what you
just about, so far, just about what he's done. Yeah, exactly. All right, sir, I think you're still on deck.
Yes, sir, we are. I am. So, I guess the first agenda item for consideration by the board is adoption of the three budgets that we just presented. Total budget in all three funds, $151,381,073, consisting of $120.1 million general fund, $25.15 million debt service, and $6.1 million food service. All balanced budgets. It is the administration's recommendation to approve these budgets.
You have any questions about that? We good? Okay, so we need a motion that the board approve the proposed 2020-21 budgets in the amount of $151,381,073 for the general operating fund of $120,129,459, debt service fund of $25,150,225, and food service fund of $6,101,389. All right, motion by Travis, seconded by Christie. All in favor? That motion passes. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Next up, first portion of the tax rate, maintenance and operation. As I mentioned in the presentation, we are recommending a 3.5 cent decrease in the tax rate on the M&O side for 93.49 cents. Now, we start getting into some of the required language for truth and taxation purposes, and I'll take just a second to talk about that, and I know some others may want to, but obviously the intent of the effective tax rate, or what's known now as the no new revenue rate, is to give taxpayers information about how much a taxing entity would need to tax to be able to generate the same amount of revenue that they had in the previous year, right? Now, for school districts, that's a little bit different than it is for counties and cities and so forth, because our state funding is associated with our local funding and what we generate. So, for instance, our M&O rate, the no new revenue rate, is right at 91 cents, okay? So, in theory, at 91 cents, we would generate the same amount of revenue that we did last year, okay? Given the increase in appraisal values. However, because of the state funding component, that is completely untrue when you look at the total revenue picture. We are proposing 93.5 cents, and it only generates basically the same amount of revenue that we had in the previous year. So, whereas a county or a city and so forth, folks could kind of look at the no new revenue rate, and let's say that they intended to not generate any additional revenue, maybe free salaries and things of that nature, because none of their other funding is tied to ours is, like state funding purposes, well, you could back off of that. But the reality is, in our situation, if we were to back off of our tax rate, for every penny that we lose locally, we lose about $750,000, and we also lose about $800,000 for every in state aid for every penny that we back off. And so the reality is that looking at it from a no new revenue perspective, solely from local funding purposes, is really what we're looking at. So I kind of convoluted a little bit. It's a difficult kind of discussion. So.
The finance system by the state of Texas incentivizes districts to actually keep those tax pennies in, because they weight them and they pay them extra. And if we drop them, we lose big time in the state funding. So although it's part of the language, but it's just.
If you look at this on the bottom, which is required language, there's a suggestion that there's an increase in the tax rate by 2.53% in one of the statements, and the reality is that we're decreasing the tax rate by 3.5 pennies.
So I think it's worth pointing out.
Well, yeah, the fact is, what we're accountable for is the tax rate, and it went down.
Yes, sir.
If the taxes go up, which they will, it's due to.
Yes, sir. I didn't think it was possible, but it actually got, more confusing this year than in previous years with some of the language.
Yes.
So.
But we're dropping it 3.5 pennies.
Yes,
The tax rate.
And again, if you look at the bottom statement that Mr. Blizzard will have to read, the first part of that sentence basically is a comparison of the current year M&O proposed rate versus the no new revenue rate, okay? So it suggests that there's an increase of 2.53%, but in the very next statement, in the same sentence, the reality is that the proposed rate for M&O versus last year's proposed and adopted rate is a decrease of $35 on a $100,000 home. So, clear as mud. So it is our recommendation to approve the M&O rate of 93.49 cents per $100 valuation, which is a decrease of 3.5 pennies.
Any questions? We good?
Truth in taxation.
That's right.
Semantics.
Okay, I get to read something that obviously you can tell a lot of us don't agree with the words, but I'm required to read it anyway.
It's a mess.
We need a motion that the board approve the 2020 ad valorem tax rate for maintenance operations of 93.9349 cents per $100 valuation. This tax rate will raise more taxes for maintenance and operations than last year's rate. The tax rate will effectively be raised by 2.53% and will decrease taxes for maintenance and operations on a $100,000 home by approximately $35. We need a motion for this. Motion by Chuck, seconded by Joe. All in favor? Motion passes.
Okay, moving on to the second component, the INS or debt service interest sinking rate. As I mentioned earlier, we are recommending maintaining the 33.95 cents per $100 valuation. There is additional language at the bottom of this one that actually addresses the total tax rate for effective or no new tax revenue purposes. Which again, the reality is that we're decreasing 3.5 pennies. Okay? So it's our recommendation to approve the INS rate of 33.95 and the total tax rate of 1.2744 per $100 valuation.
Any questions? We good? Okay, we need a motion that the board adopt the 2020 ad valorem tax rate for debt service of 0.3395 cents, 33.95 cents per $100 valuation. I further move that the total property tax be increased by the adoption of a tax rate of $1.27.44 per $100, which is effectively a 3.53% increase in the tax rate. Motion by Travis, seconded by Christie. All in favor? That motion passes too.
Okay, moving along. We have just a quick end-of-year budget amendment request for our 1920 general fund. There were some changes handed down from GASB 85 that require us to record, if you will, some additional TRS payments that the state pays TRS on behalf of our employees. And those were not budgeted for at the beginning of the year. It's an increase on it washes. It's an increase on the revenue and the expense. It's simply a bookkeeping thing. So, excuse me. It's our recommendation to approve this amendment for an increase of $580,000. Go ahead and answer any questions.
So this is for bookkeeping purposes?
Yes, ma'am. There's actually no money exchanging hands from us to any entity, but there is money exchanging hands from the state of Texas on behalf of our employees. So they just added an additional component for the TRS care that before we did not have to keep on our books. It doesn't inflate what it looks like we're receiving and spending.
We've talked about this little deal in the past, so the debt we have to
Exactly.
hold.
Yep.
Okay, we good? No questions? All right, so we need a motion that the board approve the 2019-2020 end-of-year budget amendments for the general fund for the fiscal year ending August 31st, 2020. Motion by Kelly, seconded by Sonia. All in favor? That motion passes.
I promise that's the last amendment for There was only two, so that's not bad. Okay.
It's all over this thing, sir.
So we transitioned into bond refunding discussion. I have Mr. Lucas John here tonight. He'll help me out in just a moment, our new financial advisor. He's going to get into some of the strategic options that we have with the current refunding. I just wanted to talk briefly, and it's a wonderful opportunity. We're going to save a tremendous amount of money, but just wanted to talk briefly about our debt picture before Mr. John jumps in. And this is something that we looked at before. This is kind of our existing debt picture. I think the most important thing about this slide is that if you look kind of towards the center, because because of our aggressive defeasance plan and refunding things that we've taken advantage of, you'll see that over 50% of our debt will be paid off by 2028. So that's within 8 years, and that's a good position to be in. Okay. Secondly, I wanted to show some of the efforts that we've had over the past roughly 10 years in terms of refunding, bond defeasance approach, and the savings associated with those things. So there towards the middle top of the page, you can see some of the things that we've done in terms of bond refunding over the last 10 years, and then the savings. And you can kind of go down the list there, 1.2 million, 1.7, 5.9. Recall we structured the 2015 bond on 25 years instead of the industry norm 30, which saved roughly 13 million. And then a new chart for you, Ms. Evil, and then everyone else for that matter.
I like this
You
one.
can see with our aggressive bond defeasance plan and refunding opportunity that we're looking at in 2021, and again, I don't want to steal Mr. John's thunder, but you can see that it will put us at the end of 2021 in a very favorable place in terms of debt per student when you take into consideration the other comparisons from 1920 with our peers. Lowest point in 10 years, so it's a good place to be. Any questions on that? And here's, I guess I put this in every presentation I had.
It's a good one. It's a good one.
Once again. So I'll let Mr. Jonathan take it from here.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. So I wanted to talk to you all about some of the bonds that are outstanding, opportunity to refinance those, and what that could mean to the district. And so, see, the word I'm using tonight is optionality. And the whole purpose for you all is to have an idea of what can be done in several different ways as far as the refunding goes, but it doesn't commit yourselves to future actions, doesn't commit future boards, just opens up very strong possibilities for the district to be able to be very efficient with the debt. So with that, you're not taking the clicker from me. You're not doing a good job with it anyway. So let's talk about a couple of your different series that are outstanding. Your 13 series, the ones that I put a red border around, let's identify the coupons of, you can see 5% that we would like to have the board consider refinancing. Right now, interest rates are a lot closer to 2%. So this particular series gives us substantial opportunity to get substantial savings. The 16 series, very similar, also has a number of 5% coupons that we think we could save quite a bit of money. So when we talk about savings, there's different ways that this can be done. And that's what we want to articulate to y'all tonight to see what are some of y'all's thoughts about not just refinancing at a lower interest rate. What if we try to actually shorten some of our debt? And so really, that's what the next few slides are going to focus on. Kind of give you a big picture here. If we're going to refinance, one thing we probably want to consider is bigger picture for the district. That the district's going to consider in the future additional capital needs that will require a bond election, and you have new issuances, that you're wanting to be in a position to obviously be able to pay down that debt quickly as well. And so what we're going to talk to you about is a few different ways that this can be done. Because if we take the refinancing, where we could go bond for bond, where we could try to shorten the term and talk about what is that savings. And so that's where I really want to get into what does some of that look like. So here you'll see a bond for bond approach. Basically, you start with the new debt service and the old debt service. You focus on those two columns. You'll see then to the right there's a savings column. That savings shows you a very similar amount, a little over 1.3 million per year. And so that is substantial savings over the life of the debt, which as you see, it doesn't actually shorten the existing debt. It keeps the existing debt where it's currently at. So we want to show you another option of what if we try to take some of the savings that we were generating in some of those years. Instead of getting that savings, what if we actually focused on trying to pay off some of that debt early, move up that debt, and start to retire it in a sooner fashion. You'll see here that creates additional savings by cutting off 2 years of existing debt that the district currently has, but also taking the rest of it and refinancing essentially from about a 5% bond to a 2% bond. And so creates even more savings, you see, but then what we want to also say is, well, even though we still have almost 900,000 in savings per year, what if we try to take some of that to focus on paying off even more debt? You'll see, where you cut off those last 4 maturities, you didn't change it.
Did you send me that, man? Sorry about that.
Okay. I'll take it. All right, so here, instead of 900,000 savings, y'all can see it's a little over 340 a year. It's good savings per year, but you'll also see then the bigger picture is this one's focused on trying to actually cut off additional years off the debt service. Bottom line, there's not a right approach or a wrong approach. The upside is this, even the agenda item that's before you for consideration this evening of a bond order, all it's doing is giving us the ability to move forward with refinancing. Chance for y'all to kind of think about this a little bit, talk to your administrative team and see what makes most sense for the district. Should we try to actually create more capacity by going bond for bond, as an example? 1.3 million in savings per year creates quite a bit of capacity for new money issuance. Then if we think about, well, let's cut a little bit off of that savings and actually pay some more principal instead. If we want to cut off 2 years, definitely an option. Like I said, there's nothing that's right or wrong about any of these. It's a matter of what is in the best interest of the district, taxpayers, and obviously building capacity moving forward for all the students that are still to come. And so really that's what we wanted to show y'all this evening. If you go big picture about what's in front of y'all, it's a bond order, and y'all are very familiar with those when you talked about defeasances, you talked about prior refinancings. Essentially, there's some different parameters for your financing team to be able to work within with your administrative team to go ahead and execute pricing and lock in an interest rate that's favorable for the district within a structure that makes the most sense for the district. And so really that's what we're talking about this evening. Wanted to open up at that point, see what questions y'all might have or clarifications that we can definitely provide.
And I think, just to reiterate, like Lucas said, there are no wrong answers here. So, we will, take the board's direction and move on down the road. And at the time where it's time to strike, we'll kind of make the best decision for the district, but certainly allow any input from you guys as well. So.
I think we as a board have been, we paid down debt early. And so I'm all for that, and hopefully.
Well, if you look at even the bond for bond scenario, we're talking about saving over $26 million in interest. It's a good place to be. So, by far the largest refunding opportunity I've ever been part of. It's a good place. So.
Well, and you said you'd go from a 5% interest to some
Probably
2% in some cases?
Roughly, yes ma'am. When we finish this, the true interest cost on this transaction probably will be in that ballpark, given where current rates are. We may see rates move some, but in the current market conditions, it's a great opportunity for the district to substantially lower the amount of interest. The one thing I'd probably point out additionally, if we go back to any of those slides, you focus on the current year. Let's use the one in the middle. So in that first year, the one that ends 21, the budget cycle that y'all are currently in, what we have done is actually shifted forward principle as part of this process in each of these scenarios and say, hey, no surplus, let's make sure we maximize the amount of funds that we can pay off in 2021. Essentially move forward a substantial amount of principal that's owed several years from now, move it forward to this upcoming year. So that's part of what is accelerating the amount of savings that is provided for the district by shifting forward, obviously principal, and trying to repay it as fast as can be.
So if I understand, then you're gonna lower the interest rate, and then shorten the term. So then you're hitting it on both sides. And
Yeah. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I think the new thing, and kudos to Lucas for bringing this to our attention, is the combo of doing the refunding tonight, but also applying the defeasance amount that we were anticipating using towards that so we can maximize our savings.
That could be significant.
Well, it sounds like there's no bad answers here.
And it's nothing wrong with to decide tonight.
25 million.
But it comes down to a good-looking crystal ball as to what we think we might need going forward.
Absolutely, yes, so there is no wrong answer. Even in scenario two, when you start wiping off 6.7 million in principal a year, that's, 10 pennies of tax effort, so that's huge. So we will carry on. That's good.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions, comments?
Significant.
All right, so we need a motion to approve an order authorizing the issuance of Magnolia ISD unlimited tax refunding bonds, taxable series 2020, which may be issued in one or more series, providing for the award of the sale thereof in accordance with specified parameters and enacting other provisions related thereto. Motion by Sonia, seconded by Travis. All in favor? That motion passes.
I think that's my last thing.
Go get us some money, Dr. Morris.
We promise we'll go out and make sure we use maximum amount of savings for our taxpayers based on that. Appreciate it, Mr. John, for your efforts on that.
I think this whole thing just shows a good picture of how good of stewards we are with the blessings we've been given.
And that savings is about equal to an elementary school, isn't it?
Absolutely.
That's about 25 million, isn't it now,
Yeah.
to drop one on the ground?
Build a whole new school with that.
You could build a new elementary with it, right?
Which the growth we're about to have
Yeah.
Straight to your
on the
chair.
west side of 1488 is important to think
Yeah.
about.
One more item.
Yeah, that's huge.
It's the incentive.
Good stuff.
I didn't put that on my presentation.
Oh.
I guess there is one more item.
Tone it in.
So there's one more item that I have, it's the $500.
I was gonna say, you can't run off too quick here.
Incentive retention bonus. Guys, the structure very similar to ours last year. There's no difference in terms of what we're paying, based on category of employment and things of that nature. So we're basically, obviously linking this to some of the COVID costs and so forth, but it is a true retention incentive is what it is. And so based on that, we need the board to approve a resolution that will allow us to move forward with planning to pay all of our employees $500, excluding admin, on the November 15th payroll, right before Thanksgiving. So,
Any questions, comments? All right. So we need a motion that we approve the proposed resolution establishing a one-time incentive pay program for Magnolia ISD employees. Motion by Christie, seconded by Joe. All in favor? That motion passes. Thank you. You're excused now.
Hey, thank you all on behalf of all those teachers and educators for that.
Absolutely.
It goes a long way.
That's exciting.
Help them recognize how much you guys appreciate what they're doing for
There are hearings.
them. Absolutely.
Okay, Dr. Bullock is gonna give us an item for review. We don't need a motion on this. We're gonna hear from him, though.
That's right. Thank you, Mr. Blizzard, members of the board, Dr. Stevens. This is policy update 115 from tasby, and a few things here. This has, kind of your normal housekeeping stuff. There is one big ticket item that affects numerous policy codes. So I'm going to take these out of order a little bit just because I thought it'd be easier to kind of explain the overall gist of it. These changes come out of the, I believe I've got my number right, the most recent legislative session, which was the 86th legislative session, as well as updates from the Texas Administrative Code and different court cases that have happened since then. So first off, let's start off with two quick ones. It would be the local policy, the first one BF, and then DED local. BF local, this is the epitome of the housekeeping chore. All it does is mention in the policy that legal policies are not adopted by the board, they're just reflected in policy. So we've been operating under that premise for a long time, and I think our policy service felt that it was important to go ahead and write that into the policy so that there would be no confusion. DED local, again, doesn't change any practice in the district. It takes out specific language about who can receive vacation days from the school district, which namely are 260 contract day employees that work year-round that we give a certain number of paid vacation days to. The recommendation is to take that out of policy and to leave it in administrative regulations basically unchanged, but the feeling is that that doesn't quite rise to the level of need to be in policy. It's more of a guideline that we'll operate under. The big issue here is there have been some changes to Title IX. And so the Title IX changes affect several policies. The main two that are in front of you tonight are DIA local and FFH local. As you guys are well aware, the D series deals with employee issues, and the F series deals with student issues. So these are mirror policies that we follow as our guidance and direction when we are implementing the requirements of Title IX, especially when it comes to complaints of discrimination, harassment, or retaliation that fall under the heading of Title IX for us to investigate, to communicate about, and to take action as required by law. So the changes that have come, there is a more clear definition of sexual harassment and discrimination and retaliation based on sex after a Supreme Court case that was, I guess, decided in June, just this summer. It's Bostock versus Clayton County, Georgia, and that ends up telling us that we now need to, in this policy, include issues of gender, biological sex, things like that under the protected class of Title IX. So that's going to impact not only our policy that deals with employees, but also the one that deals with students. So that's DIA local and FFH local. At the same time, there have been federal guidelines that have come down for Title IX that give us a more prescriptive path to follow on how to investigate and how to inform people there is an investigation. If a complainant comes forward, what we're required to tell them, and what timelines that we're supposed to follow, as well as the rights for respondents in the case of a claim. So all of that is incorporated into both of these policies. And I think probably the other thing to call your attention to is a requirement that we follow, I guess, from a legal standard in determining if there has been some violation of Title IX, that at the end of our investigation, we look at a preponderance of evidence instead of the higher standard of clear and convincing evidence. So we're looking at the preponderance of evidence overall when we're making these decisions and informing people. So I'm going to pause just right there. That's kind of a lot to digest, and see if you guys have any questions at this point. You don't have to come up with a question.
Yeah.
It's not a requirement. So in actuality, it doesn't change our practice very much. You know, we, I think some of the requirements for the investigation mirror very closely to what we've been doing about informing people if there is an investigation and of the result of it. But these now become requirements that we have to live by. I think, one of the most interesting things is we now have to develop a separate complaint policy dealing just with the results of investigations under Title IX. And it has to be separate from the grievance policy. So we're in the process of doing that now, but wanted to go ahead and bring this as part of the update to you. Any questions on that?
Separate from the grievance process, but somewhat the same?
Yes,
process?
ma'am. Yes, ma'am, exactly. It would mirror it to some degree, but it has to operate on different timetables and not under that same policy code.
Okay.
But yes, ma'am, absolutely. I think it would look pretty similar by the time we're done developing it.
Okay.
And the main thing it would do is give everyone a chance at due process, and also give them a couple of levels to work through with any concerns before they were to present those concerns to you guys in a formal process.
Okay.
So the other changes here in the local policy codes, FNG and GF local, which are the student grievance process and the community grievance process, both of those have one minor edit, and it deals with complaints that stem from, parents or community members being banned from a campus or being forcibly removed from a campus. The law had changed a few years back, saying that anybody who had met that circumstance and was asked to leave a campus and not come back was supposed to be able to file a complaint and be in front of the school board within 90 days. And I think the courts have since clarified that 90 days is the only time in the grievance policy that is 90 calendar days, where all the other counting of days that goes into grievance are school days. Weekends and holidays don't count in those determinations. But I think the courts ruled that the 90 days, based off of the way the law was originally written, applied to only grievances for people when they're removed from campus. So that's in GF and FNG local. And then we have some training requirements that are spelled out more concisely, but again, are things we've already been doing in training for prevention of child abuse, and training requirements for staff under FFG for that. And I think that's about it. The rest of it is really kind of ticky-tacky. I don't know if that's the right thing to say that or not, but it doesn't quite rise to the level of the rest of it. So if you guys have any questions, or if there's anything you came across in the package you want to bring up, I'll do my best to answer your questions.
One thing, Title IX was a bigger overhaul than everything else.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. absolutely. And, you know, I was reminded by our attorney today that remember, all that is yet to be litigated. So, you know, this is what we think it looks like right now. Okay, again, I'll remind you guys, this is just for review. If you guys have questions, this will be back on the agenda under the consent portion for our next monthly meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Dr. Buck, I know our board always appreciates the level of scrutiny that our administrators have to work under, particularly under all the federal guidelines that we have to. And it becomes very clear when we go over our policy updates and some of those things. But we have a great group working a lot of times with our attorneys that keep us in compliance, all those things, and they follow that stuff to the T. And so I'm very proud of it. But as you know, every time we do a policy update, there's just a lot of that.
Pages
We
and
have
pages,
and
changes and
pages,
changes
we
and changes.
have to stay a part of, and they do a great job. And one of those guys is Mr. Stewart, it's part of it, stays a part of it.
Thank you, Dr. Stevens. Every year we bring to you the student handbook, and this year, basically partly due to legislative session coming and partly due to COVID, there are basically no content changes. So outside of what we do normally and naturally, as we encounter things throughout the year with parents maybe not understanding how it's said or something like that, we work hard to always provide clarifying verbiage. But there were two things I did want to bring your attention to. One, we did address one local item. It is just putting in the handbook so that parents can see it and be aware of that if we have a student driver who's having a tendency to be late and causing them to possibly miss credit in first and second period due to poor attendance, or slipping away perhaps earlier than the rest of the crowd and missing some credit, if we are in a position where credit is at stake, then we're going to look at revoking those parking privileges for a brief time till mom and dad have had a chance to work with the child's accountability and responsibility. It's just one of those tools. It's not necessarily mean that we have to use it, but it is a tool that we want parents to be aware of could be invoked if the child misuses their car. So, the second item, it's not to be dismissive at this time of masks and everything else, all things COVID. But throughout the handbook, the overlaying of any items that reflect COVID are not meant to be permanent. And that was something that TASB wanted us to point out. What it is meant to be is a temporary supplanting of what we do procedurally. So you will see items there with COVID that hopefully those disappear by next year. And Lord willing, we don't have to deal with this again. So those are the two things that we wanted to point out to you. We hope to have this posted on the website and in and out of the hands of our translator by the end of this week and ready to roll for when the kids come back on September 8th.
Great.
This item, as a reminder, it's just a review to kind of let you know the update of where things are at. It's all based on reflecting in policy, as our Stevens just pointed out, and practice of how we do those things to carry out the mission of the district. Are there any questions? Thank you.
And hopefully those COVID items disappear sooner rather than later.
You and me both.
Disappearing ink.
That's right. Okay, thank you, sir. So now it's time to appoint the delegate and alternate to the tasa tasby convention scheduled to be held Saturday, October 3rd. This year's event will be held virtually due to COVID-19. Last year's delegate was none other than Ms. Kelly McDonald. Chuck Adcock served as the alternate. And only one person has to attend the meeting. However, if both delegate and alternate want to both attend, they're welcome to. So as many can go as long. Our board of participation in the delegate assembly ensures that our voice is heard. School districts will be facing many issues in the next legislative session. So what we're looking for now is a volunteer and an alternate for this tasa tasby convention that's in early October. And there's crickets. Kelly volunteers, great, that's good. We got a volunteer for the delegate. How about a volunteer for the alternate?
I'll take that, yeah.
Yay.
Dynamic duo.
You felt good about that backup position. Because you know you got a
I know
solid.
she's gonna go.
You got a solid one in front of you there that's gonna take care of this.
Come on, we had fun.
Okay, so, good stuff. Everybody else good with this?
Absolutely.
It's great up there.
I hear the arguments.
Absolutely.
Sitting on their hands.
The crickets. Okay, so I need a motion that the board select Kelly McDonald as delegate and Chuck Adcox as alternate. We did this a year ago. To serve on the 2020 tasby delegate assembly. Motion by Sonia, seconded by Joe and Christie and everyone. All in favor? That motion passes. Thank
And
you.
everyone said, amen.
Yeah, thanks for going.
I think that's a wrap.
Anything else?
Meet you guys back there for a little executive session, but other than that, we'll get on to a very eventful, hopefully not very eventful week, but a lot of things potentially eventful.
It'd be an interesting week.
No television, no hurricane.
Yeah,
Went out and fired the truck up, so
Good. Might be cold.
maybe call
just call it.
Okay, so, now we're gonna recess into our executive session and cover consultation with the school attorney pursuant to Texas Government Code 551.071, personnel discussion recommendations pursuant to Texas Government Code 551.074, and finally, discussion of purchase, sale, exchange, or value of real property pursuant to Texas Government Code 551.072. Thank you all for being here tonight. All right, I need a motion that we adjourn this meeting. Motion by Chuck, seconded by Sonia. Meeting adjourned. Time is 9:03.
So where were you when the bank first got the problem?
Crunching numbers for this
The first time it ever
report.
happened, I was fishing on Lake Conroe with Dr. Stevens.